Thank you, and thank you, Anya. Um, so this will be a casual bunch of images and me talking, and I think if anybody has any comments or thoughts or questions as I'm going through them, feel free to just go ahead and ask or yell it out or whatever. And we can also, have questions at the end. And the way there's going to be a lot of images, and the way I like to do these is to think of them more as like a coffee table book instead of a lecture, where you just are going to flip through images, and then some of them there'll be a short description below it. There'll be a paragraph, and sometimes you won't read anything. You'll just see images. And my goal is to just give you sort of a kind of a generalized sense of what I do, and I'll just speak. So really pretend you're just sitting around at somebody's house with a coffee table book, flipping through the pages of it, because you'll be amazed at how many images there are, but it somehow will work in this period of time. The first thing is that it's sort of the description of what I do, and so what I am is, and this has been complicated for me to figure out, but I think in how language factors into all these things is that what I am is an artist, because that is how I see myself and my self-identity and how I function in the world. But I'm interested in a lot of disciplines that get the names of architecture, sometimes design, sometimes craft, and all these things. And in walking over here with Anya, she was kind of wondering how I ended up doing what I did, and I think the answer that I gave was I just said I had my interest, which has remained pretty much about the same thing since I was young, but people just sort of say, "Do you want to do this?" And I say yes to it, and that's what led to doing architecture. I have no architectural training, so I'm not really an architect. I really I've had no training in any design at all. I really just have essentially a degree in conceptual art, basically. So this really comes out of that. So this is a image of a juice glass, and I put this up here because a long time ago I was sort of torn between kind of loving the domesticity and the simplicity and the clarity of this kind of glass, and felt like it was kind of a perfect object that just sort of said a lot to me in its hominess, but its functionality. But I also found myself at the same time kind of liking cute little things put on juice glasses at the same time, sort of imagery that it sometimes is kind of sweet. And I think, we're going back quite a ways in my career, but I think I had sort of this like guilty pleasure of liking sweetness and imagery, but at the same time liking the purity of just a simple utilitarian thing with a tiny twist of domesticity, like the taper or whatever in it. And I spent a long time trying to kind of reconcile that and make sense of it. And I think I came up with, this is a piece I did like 10 or 15 years ago, but I came up with the idea that the reality of it is both juice glasses are in fact not invisible, that they're both highly visible and highly charged with meaning and everything, and that try as you might, like with the clear juice glass, to make an invisible glass or an invisible chair, you're going to fail. You can make a clear glass or a clear chair, but you still will see it, and it still will have all of this content and all this meaning and all these associations and all this feeling and bring up all this kind of stuff. And that is just, a very basic, thing of existence. And so I think what I became interested in both in looking at art and objects that, through the history of mankind, was that I think you can, and I think in my own personal journey, I think I came from sort of a not the best childhood in the world, and I think I actually looked for love because I wasn't finding it so much in my family. I chose furniture for some reason. I don't quite know why, but I sort of saw furniture as the source of love as a child and imprinted on it, and became highly tuned at discriminating how you could find little signs of love within inanimate objects, which I think is a lot of about kind of art seekers look for in art. But I think that's true of every object. And so I think my own personal journey, it really has been both to understand that issue and try ways to explore my feeling and my place within that as I, try to kind of grow and reconcile, who I am as a person and as a person that makes objects and puts it in the world. So basically, I'm just trying to both find love and show love in my own way of it within all the things that I do, which sounds sort of simple and kind of corny, but, oh well. This is actually, this is not going to be a lecture of everything I ever did, but this is the first table I ever made a very, very long time ago, which is essentially the same table I'm still making now, really long time ago, like 35 years ago or something. And this table was just a very simple table that I painted the top of it a different coat of a coat of blue paint every day for 30 days in this particular blue color that was related to these pillowcases. So that's just up there, and there was more to the piece, but it's just showing you. Then another early table was a meditation on my grandfather's death, and just the table and a painting of his farm in Oklahoma, and somehow how the object and the painting kind of resonated together to show sort of my grief, I guess, and sadness and sense of time. And this is a very old painting that I was called Self-Portrait with Jim, and I'm the chair, and Jim was my first boyfriend. Another early piece, sort of exploring. I think a huge part of object looking and object making and object thinking and life itself is this very basic idea of sort of figure-ground relationships, which I think in the broadest sense is life is about, making a decision what's in the foreground and what's in the background, what matters, what doesn't, what's the backdrop for what matter. And I think, this really with the knob, the handle for the drawer becoming, relating to the landscape that's drawn on the other one, talks about issues of functionality and issues about intentionality of objects and the object of the knob somehow, becoming, not just the backdrop, but the foreground of it floating within that landscape. Photograph from a while ago, I think kind of talking about that same issue. Another photograph. Now we've come into more current times. This is up at the Henry in Seattle. The center hall table, and I did, there were these funny old sculptural niches from the Henry, which is a beautiful building from the 20s that I think long ago had sculpture in it for a long time were just kind of empty, or they put placards and signage in it, but they commissioned me, and I did these 4 sculptures that were just meant to sit within these niches. This is a really long ago, the first upholstered, the first kind of seating thing I ever did, and it actually was in many ways very related to Tony Smith's sculptures and about kind of human scale. And this is just under 5 feet long and about 26 inches high. So it's if you lay on it, either your head or your feet have to hang off, and if you sit on it, your feet can't touch the ground. So, and and it's sort of about how you don't fit, but you do fit, and it's comfortable, it's uncomfortable, and it's about sort of human scale in relation to something that's functional and not functional. And a later sculpture that was commissioned that is meant to be sat on-ish. This is the, I noticed was the advertising piece for my lecture. And this is called a daybed and a table and a chest of drawers that fit together, with the idea that they are completely 2 functional objects that you kind of realize, but when they go together, they are rendered purely sculptural. So the chest of drawers, are functioning drawers that once the daybed kind of nestles and kind of spoons with it, then they're both rendered dysfunctional in the functional sense, but completely functional in this other kind of resonant, poetic, sculptural way. And obviously they start becoming kind of living beings in this way, and there's a sexual sense of it. This is a group of furniture that was done as my memory of childhood furniture that I hadn't seen in a long time, that I'd been doing doodles of for a long time, that I gave to my shop, the guy who runs my shop, who then he interpreted those, the scale and the details, and then they went into his computer thing and his SolidWorks program, and then through my shop, and they turned out. And once they started doing that, I made no changes. I let them be filtered through sort of the current way that things get made for me. So they exist as these very funny objects that are both familiar and not familiar, and they're familiar in my current way that I make things, which is this painting that is actually still came out of that first table, and the 30 days of hand painting, they're all hand painted and rubbed out, and this particular, I had a epiphanal moment when my car broke down once a very long time ago at this old gas station in California, looking at the enamel paint that I have just been painting everything the same way since then. These are vases I did a long time ago. I found bottles and grouped them together. These are a while ago now, but some more recent things I did that are called vases about language and redemption. A long, long time ago, I did a show where I painted little tiny paintings of houses in San Diego, and then I built the facade and back part of that house in there myself, and then I had to dismantle it and throw it away. It was this very brief show. So that I was led to me thinking kind of funny now how that was so fleeting, and that I wanted to do real architecture instead, because it seemed so kind of wasteful and fast to build a house, even though now. And so that led to, again, people saying things. And this is a project I did 10 years ago, so in Venice, in California, that was a post-production facility of architecture and interiors and furniture. This is where they wanted these kind of iconic wingbacks, but they needed them to be able. They needed chairs that swiveled, so I just lifted it up on a swivel base, and they swivel. Another early architectural piece. But the funny thing is, I felt that somehow architecture was more permanent. But I think I've decided, now that I've been doing it long enough and some things have come and go, that I think architecture is the most ephemeral of art forms. I've decided that it just, because it's so trumped by real estate and real estate values, that you have to sort of just accept the fact that architecture is all going to go away. And if you really care about your things lasting a long time, you should do drawings and put them in a drawer. Then they'll last forever or a long time. This is a remodel of a house in Los Angeles, where the entire, on the right-hand side, it's a whole new wing where we brought the interior stairway, which we modified some, to the outside. Had the window sort of, I love like the clip on that, the double hung window of creating, not in a false way, but in a real way, the conflicts that occur in trying to reconcile unreconcilable things within design and architecture, and that you realize that they don't have to reconcile, that they can just sort of bump up against each other and coexist happily. Another remodel. This is the oldest house in Beverly Hills. We did a combination of restoration of it and also added things on, both semi and the kind of contemporary thing, trying to be almost like a museum. You know how if you, in contemporary conservation standards, you you don't go out of your way to make anything that's added on look overly like it was part of it. Like in this case, we restored the original porch in the back that had been long since covered over, but then it wanted to be interior space, so then we put glass in it and floated that window in it. The pool house for that house. A model of a bigger house that didn't get built. Belt buckle. This was this is the front porch from the movie version of The Music Man that Marion Peruse was constantly at, which I think The Music Man is like one of the greatest American art things. It's just how it works with language and everything. This is a chair we've been doing for like 10 years, and every time we do it, it's made differently. And the idea is it looks cattywampus, but when you sit in it, it's completely symmetrical. So visually, it looks all kind of like it's tippy and everything, but it's actually completely level, symmetrical, and it feels the same. So the chair is, there's this dissonant, or not dissonant, but difference between the feeling of it and the visualness of it. These are some just furniture doodles, some furniture. I started a little furniture company a long time ago, and it led to just doing all these furniture commissions, which I still do, and it's kind of crazy that people want furniture, and I just cook up these ideas, and they keep happening. This is a found table and a little table that goes with it. I think, take my thing about love and apply it to this, right? I think that's a sculpture. The coffee table. Entry hall table. Kind of showing the paint finish that's all just carefully applied, and then we rub it out afterwards. And it's this kind of strange thing that looks like it's not hand done, but yet it also doesn't look like you could do it with any other way. Dining set. This is the coffee table book where we're flipping through pages. I love colors. I think it's probably apparent, but I also love white kind of as a color, and I love using white as it's supposed to be an invisible paint. Like in this case, it's meant to be just two pedestals, and then the white is supposed to disappear, but of course it doesn't disappear. Or underwear, somebody suggested. It's kind of like our socks, white socks, that you're not supposed to see, if your dress pants pull up. The sculpture that's meant to be used, set seat. Show I did a while ago at the Seattle Art Museum that I created essentially a kind of a house-type shape from the components of a house, from refrigerators stacked as like Legos, and tables stacked, and mattresses stacked, and toilets lined up as if they're the sofa, and a refrigerators. It's a coffee table. Refrigerators is bed. Sculpture. One is in Oregon. Then in the Are there any questions? It'd be more fun if people said things while I was talking. No? All right. So I was doing these house remodels, and I realized at some point somebody might ask me to do a house from the ground up, meaning that I wouldn't be responding to an existing thing. And I realized I didn't quite know what I would do, so it occurred to me to start doing doodles so I could figure out what it would look like. And I put them together in this little book called Charming Homes for Today. And these are just a few doodles that I did. Again, playing a lot with scale and imagery and recognizable things. But I was pretty focused on the plans too, like how I could imagine people wanting to live. But sure enough, somebody did give me there's been a few now options to do a house, but this is the first house that I did from nothing, and it's a house in Manhattan Beach, just outside of Los Angeles on the beach. It's kind of a row house, kind of a beach house on. And so it's on a walk block. So the front was on kind of a pedestrian thing, and then the cars would enter the back. So the front was very lively, and the back was very modest and not really meant to look like much, even though it does look like a lot of those doodles in the book inside of it. The feature. I love staircases. I love when I do architecture, how to pull them out from the house and I guess treat them like a piece of furniture or a sculpture or an object, and finding subtle ways to do that, which color is one, but typically my stairways tend to not touch much. Like I like to separate them. And I don't know if you can kind of see that this staircase really is, for the most part, floating away from the house. It's actually held up by cables above that hold it, and other metal arms that come out, which is something I've done a lot. But I also in furniture, like the way I live, and when I kind of set furniture up for people, I kind of am terrified of furniture that touches walls for some reason. My theory is that I was deeply impacted by a Twilight Zone episode where this little girl falls next to the bed, and she falls into the fourth dimension inside the wall and gets trapped there for a while until the family dog goes in and is able to lead her out, and her father can reach in and grab it. And after I saw that when I was pretty young, I had to I'd slept with my bed up in the corner, so I could be against the wall, so the headboard on one side. But after that, I immediately had to move my bed out so that I wouldn't actually roll into the wall accidentally. And I don't know, but I think that was so traumatic that I've never, all my furniture in my house is at least 12 inches from the wall. So that's what I do with staircases. Has anybody seen that episode? It's pretty good. But I think the key thing is that the dog, right? Obviously it's the dog that's going to save. And then this is looking down at that staircase. It's sort of the same thing, this sort of iconic modernist lamp that's hanging there, but then I use them several times in this, and I have the ceiling mounting, whatever you call it, floating there as if it's, it's somehow there's an invisible ceiling. I've sort of taken that and tried to, again, show that as it's a standalone object, so it doesn't feel like it's just iconic modernist light fixture stuck in here, but it's, it's meant to be its own object that's used. It's just, it becomes a very different thing to me. But then there's also, the kind of this whole wall is meant to look like it's sort of a kind of a hippie collage of windows kind of stuck together and not, yet it's overly clean. Might be going too slow. What time is it? Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing you gain by working with other people is you get to do more because you're, amplifying what you can do. And I actually, I learned how to do working when I was in graduate school. But when I got out, I realized that I didn't really want to set up my own shop and become a woodworker. I was more interested in the ideas. So I, started commissioning pieces to be made. And that's pretty much the way I've always done what I do. So I currently have a shop in Seattle that builds all my furniture, and they're my employees, and I work with them to do that. And then I also have a small architectural firm that has architects, licensed architects that work for me. So, I mean, so I did make a decision a number of years ago that instead of sourcing everything out, to have people that worked with me on an ongoing basis, because I wanted the kind of closeness and the kind of growth that happens from working, all as a team to try to solve problems and get projects done and do that kind of thing. And I think that's been an incredibly rewarding thing for me, even though I've got to learn about having small businesses and having employees and how to keep enough work coming in for that. But I think the complexity and the depth of the objects and the architecture, I think, wouldn't have been possible if I was just sort of trying to find another firm or a carpenter to do things one at a time. But I mean, a huge collaboration, obviously, in architecture or commissions with furniture is you're collaborating with the person or the people, whoever is commissioning you, and you end up in these profoundly collaborative and psychological relationships that I also think are really fascinating and really I've learned a lot from. I mean, I like the way other people bump up against what I do, in every level, in every direction. I've also collaborated with other architects on bigger projects and things like that. But I don't know. I mean, is that where you were?
Yeah, I was just curious.
I mean, a huge thing is just I mean, this is like a fraction of the stuff I've done. So part of it, if you work with other people, you get to do more. This is Western Bridge. I don't know has anybody ever been to Western Bridge? It's an art center in Seattle that I designed for Bill and Ruth True. And they took an old warehouse, and I did this. They wanted a kind of sculptural component, so the entryway is essentially a very large double-hung window that has a door in it, so you kind of enter the wall, window, door, which gets into the language thing, like what is it? It's a window, but it's not really a functioning window, and it's a wall, but the wall opens, and it's functionally the door, but visually it's not the door, a door. Just a few shots of it. It's actually going to only be around for another year and a half, and it's a project going to go away. But if you're in Seattle, you should go. They have shows there all the time. Some more shots of the interior, because it's got a kind of a home-like quality to it. Bedroom in it. It's a commission for UC San Francisco campus, the Mission Bay campus, where I did all the seating in the main quad area that started with putting these concrete benches I designed in the locations where the landscape architect had wanted benches. But then they start changing, and this came from well, first I felt like in a bit of, I guess, a kind of bratty critique of the landscape architect's idea. There were those benches like the original ones were where you face away, they face out. So it didn't really, and they were all, like maybe 20 feet apart. So it kind of gave no way for conversation. And this is I don't know if you know, but UC San Francisco is a science campus, and my spouse, Mike Jacobs, is a scientist, and I'd been at his lab at the UW a lot, and I was really fascinated. And it was his lab at that time, which was the Genome Center there, was a relatively new piece of architecture, I think done by NBBJ, with contemporary ideas within it. But the people working there, the scientists, essentially made forts out of anything they could find, because the place as a piece of architecture wasn't really working for what they needed for meetings and groups and having lunch and everything. And they had just found old thises and that's and kind of dragged it around and built these worlds. So I used that as a starting point for this. And so it was as if the concrete, elegant benches that I designed that fit the design of the landscape architecture. There had been a giant party where people had come in with giant knives and sliced the concrete benches apart and turned them other ways and moved them around. And then you were seeing it, really as if there had been this sort of big party that had taken over and, laid it on its side so you could sit on it. And then I had these place markers. At times, they got completely moved from the footings of foundations where the benches would be. But then I also asked Mike what the iconic thing from a lab was, and he said it was the -80 freezers that they used. So I fabricated some and laid them on the sides as tables, as benches, and in the meetings, and this is sort of, again, into the collaboration with people, the kind of user meetings from the campus, the school, liked what I was doing when they saw the proposal, but they said they wanted more color, and they wanted maybe some wood because it would be warmer in the climate there. So I just was like, sure, color, and then I made some out of bright fiberglass and some wooden ones. And it was really the idea that, life could bump up against all this stuff in every direction and change it and mutate it and make it more livable. And then for me, I kind of included, a brief history of chairs of the 20th century by making these bronze chairs. It was sort of for my pleasure. And then again, in my kind of being a bit of a brat, there was a few trees that were in the landscape plan that were in the wrong place, and I actually made bronze casting of stumps from the kind of trees they were supposed to be, but pretended to saw them off and make them into benches. And then when it was done, I found these students there actually barbecuing, which I took as a success. More furniture. We'll kind of go. This is sort of about how things open and how your hand works. This is from a long, long time ago, before you were born. An entry hall chest, a chest of drawers, cabinet. Working with wood, kind of as almost like a painting. And this is the kind of thing, again, by having my own shop and my own people, we sort of started working with wood in this very particular way. I like this piece where you sort of see where the drawers are by the simple lines. I mean, I love that line that's created by the functionality of the plane. It's both kind of decorative, and you know it's a drawer, but it's also a line, sort of like a Bob Mangold painting. This is a piece that I was commissioned to do that was a dining room piece that it actually slightly splays up and moves out, and I took all these pictures because it looks like, to me, like the lens is distorting it, but it's actually not. It really is the piece that's sort of doing that, and the drawers come out in every direction. This is a case good that is it's a Sub-Zero refrigerator, but a kind of a reference to a John McLaughlin painting in the back, but also is a storage unit on the sides. This looks like a refrigerator, but it's actually made of 2 stacked tables that then have shelves in it, so that it's really a storage unit. So it gets into that issue of, well, is it a refrigerator? Is it tables? Or is it a bookcase? Or is it all of those, right? Yes?
Are these, I've seen some pieces that are kind of similar, like Peter Bearable, the Polygram series.
Uh-huh.
Another does it all, and I was wondering if this came before that, or vice versa.
These?
Yeah, like the white, and then you also have the table for yeah, this kind of see it, that, like that cabinet right there.
This is probably from about 12 years ago. So I don't know how to place it in that. I mean, it's, yeah. This is my own thing. But yeah, or by the universe. I mean, these are like this drawer is sort of, pushed out, and the black you see in the top looks like it's this dark inside of the drawer, but it's really a false thing, and you pull it out, and then it's a functional drawer beyond it. And then the gray, this is, it's sort of like it's a door partially open. And it's sort of there are these things that are moving that exist in a different zone than the sycamore cabinets themselves. This is a piece that is called, I was going to call it self-portrait, but instead the name is 2 chests of drawers, one with no knobs and the other with drawers that are too big. So the ones with the stacked drawers are like 1/8 of an inch too big to fit in to the slots, and the other one there's no knobs, and yet they're made in my sort of shop's obsessively careful craftsmanship way. So again, this is completely, totally sculptural, and yet made in every way like functional furniture. This one is, the painting is actually a carefully done oil painting by me, and then the functional chest of drawers below it. It's one of my favorite pieces. These are just drawings that are just drawings. Because at one point I realized that my only real craft is just drawing, and I started doing drawings for the sake of them. But then this is a show called Chest. No. You can ask me a question, but there's not a number on the bed. That was that chest again in the bigger picture. I mean, I think you get what it is, right? It was the price of the thing. Why? This is a dining room set with all the chairs kind of doing slightly different things like that. You can't see those mirror in the back. 2 voids, paint airbrushed. This is a whole show I did. Is this going on too long? Are you still interested? I could go faster. This is a show of, it's called a slapback chair that just kind of showed my fascination with slapback chairs. I'll just kind of, and then both turned into sculptural objects and functional things. Like, it's really easy to make a chair a sculpture. You just cut off a leg. That what you're seeing on the right is a hole cut through the wall that's in one of the openings of the chairs. Another show of furniture. That's showing that where you're looking through to the other room. This is actually up at Portland, and it was at the Portland Art Museum a few years. It's just some shots of my shop that I stuck in there for no reason, or to share. It's a piece up at, I don't know if anybody been to the Olympic Sculpture Park that I was commissioned to do, that's called Love and Loss, and it spells out Love with the V, little apple tree, and the O is a little reflecting pond, and then the and is a spinning neon sign. This is a lamp of Joan, my dog. But what I love about this and the next lamp is that, and this is a vase I have dragged around for like 30 or 40 years that I then made a bronze casting of, but it's like, how do you decide to make something into a lamp? And there's sort of, I think you have basically 2 decisions. Either you make a base and put the post next to it and illuminate it, or you just use the thing and then you have to like drill into it and stick the shade on it. And I think if you meditate on the decision of which one to do, I think it's an important thing to think about. There's no judgment about the right or wrong. I think they both are really interesting. Probably about like 5 years ago, I was running around with Mike in Seattle, and I saw in the window this really great green chest of drawers that was a really fabulous shade of green, and I love a good chest of drawers where it starts looking like an Agnes Martin painting or something like that. It just like makes me crazy. And so I saw this, and it was like $35. And so we're loading it up in the car, and I just somehow, this gets back to how I began the whole talk, that somehow I bonded with furniture as like objects of love. And I'm just feeling like somehow everything is going to be okay because we were buying this chest of drawers. Things felt really good. And Mike, in his wisdom, as I was sort of expressing, just sort of like, wow, this is so exciting. He goes, it really is, because we only have like 48 chest of drawers. And that sort of like burrowed into me. And I thought, well, in the past, I did things like started entire furniture companies and shops to express my love of furniture. And that I thought maybe there is an easier way. And a lot, like historically, people have done things like done paintings of or take photographs of. So I set about how to take a photograph of this chest of drawers that would reflect my love of it, and that's what this is. Which what I tried to do was I wanted to take a picture that was like an elevation of something, so there wasn't, an elevation is kind of a fabulous construct where you're seeing it like God, you're seeing it all over in the same way simultaneously. And so I thought, well, how can I do that of this chest of drawers? So I decided to take many photographs that could be taken in, with huge files of digital information, so they could be printed with absolute, everything. And then you'd try to get rid of perspective as much as possible, and then you would print it full size, and you would show all, 6 sides of this thing, and like really come as close to it as possible. Of course, it's the most absurd thing ever and the hardest thing ever, because it takes up tons of space, and it doesn't really look like it, because this doesn't look like that chest of drawers, but yet, I was trying to show it. So there's something in the kind of, there's like the failure of, there's really it's the attempt to show the love, but that at some level it fails, but yet by failing it succeeds maybe. But then I had bought, as it turned out, right after that I bought another chest of drawers, a green chest of drawers, and then I decided to make this chest of drawers that was another kind of way to express my love of it. Then I bought 2 green benches, and then I made this sculpture of those 2. It's not the actual benches; these are all recreations of it. There's a blue table, some nightstands that were commissioned. There's that white drawer again. It's in the air. I think that's a conceptual thing. This is a piece of architecture. The house I did on Vashon Island off Seattle. That actually was from somebody looking at those little doodles again. Those doodles were so handy. Still the same house. The house has this gray, but I did it slightly darker to lighter, and there's, I think, about 15 shades of gray as you move the house. Like, even in this picture, you can barely see, you can't see the picture, but there's probably about 3 or 4 shades of gray, which keeps the house, it's like really lively, it's not flat. Another house for Bill and Ruth True, Seattle. People are yawning, I'll hurry. So the front of the house is this sort of enveloping thing that you go into, and it's like bending in to create this sort of womb-like thing you enter, but then it opens, and it's obviously, if it's a enclosing arc on the inside, the back side is doing this, which goes to a big view of Lake Washington, and it's also the kind of zany and crazy. Here are those stairways that touch as few places as they can. Bed, cabinet, chest of drawers, some relatively recent upholstered things that are slowly going in a little bit different direction. Maybe a lot different direction. Tables. Photographs of geranium. And here I'm focused on the pot and the plant and how they, and all 4 views of them, and how they don't quite jive. Found table. Some photographs of some fabric I've dragged around, 2 panels, all both sides of it, taken, each one of these has like about, like 100 shots, just carefully inch by inch photographing, then it's knitted piece together. This, I think, is showing improving psychological health, where this dresser, only one drawer doesn't fit. Rest of them fit. This is, I call something like one of my slap back chairs and another one. Then years back to the juice glass, I decided to do my own little juice glasses, which I did as a love poem to me and Mike. And they goes together. If you look through, it's all dissonant, but if you look the right way, it turns into that. Okay, that's all.